I don't like doing my own home repairs, and when I made some videos that honestly show how much I don't like it, they seem to help a lot of other guys like me. So I thought it would be good to make this new set of videos. Guys like me have a million questions for the progressive activists that we see on the news, but nobody on TV ever asks those questions. On CNN, the host probably agrees with the activists, so his questions are weak. And on Fox News, the host just tries to make them look bad. Either way, nobody's asking the questions that might actually help us get a feel for where they're coming from, so we might actually understand them a little better. It's no surprise that people who disagree over politics are so angry at each other nowadays. So right before Christmas, me and my brother, who is himself progressive, we drove around the West and did our own interviews. We drove to 22 cities and interviewed dozens of people who support progressive causes to ask those questions that are never asked. We're not trying to change their mind or make them look bad. We just want to understand where they're coming from. These folks were brave, considering what can happen nowadays if you say one wrong thing on YouTube. And we talked about a lot of really sensitive subjects. So just leave right now if these conversations might offend you. If you stay though, I think you'll hear some things you've never heard before and have a better understanding of your fellow Americans. I did. From Walla Walla, we drove to Portland, Oregon, where we talked to author and inspirational speaker Judy Miller. She's been a yoga teacher, a counselor, and a workshop leader, and spent more than a decade in rural South Africa collaborating on marketing and product development with the Mapuche Weaving Cooperative. We talked first about a life-changing experience back in 2001.
I developed breast cancer, and that led me to really look at my life, and I wanted to make a difference. So on a larger scale. So I moved to South Africa, where I worked for 14 years in a village with a women's weaving co-op. Wow. I came back just really determined to nourish hope wherever I could, however I could.
Okay, great. So can you tell me a little bit more about Africa?
I was in a small village, and I do have a degree in textile design, and it was a weaving co-op on the grounds of a Catholic mission that had been started 30 years earlier during apartheid. And then things changed, and the women were on their own. They had a studio, they had the skills, but they had no marketing ability. So I appeared, wanting to make a difference, and decided I really couldn't do any worse than they were doing. So I began to help them, even though I'm not a marketer per se, being able to get help from people who had money to give and support this village where so many things were needed. I came back really a deep believer that when you join your hope, you know, sort of your deepest hopes with action, anything's possible.
Okay,
that's
cool.
My message, basically.
Okay.
Hope with action can do anything.
That's funny, because you didn't, when we contacted you, you didn't tell me, hey, I have a book too, but you do have a book about this, right?
I do have a book, yes.
Okay. What's the name of the book? Why don't you tell everybody about it? Or if you'd rather not, if it's too pushy.
No, I'm just blanking on what's the name of it. Book, Handspun Hope, Making a Difference in Rural South Africa. I wrote it. And then my brother, who's a writer, said, Judy, you've really got to put you in it. So I spent a year putting me in it, and then when it came out, I realized that people were just reading about me, they weren't getting my message. So now I've been training myself to be a speaker, and I'm going to try to get out there and share that message of hope.
Yeah.
Hope and action, you know, I think are miraculous.
Right. Well, I don't think there's a soul on the planet that would disagree that what you did in Africa just sounds amazing. And so I don't have any questions to ask you about that, but I did have some questions about the state of the world. You know, this recent election showed a tremendous interest in distinguishing between kind of global interests and national interests and the nationalists of the world. Do you have an opinion about that?
Well, having been in South Africa, I would say I'm for the larger view. I'm for the beyond nationalism. For me, it's about equality and compassion. And oftentimes it seems like nationalism anywhere is about fear and protection. And I would just always come down on the side of equality and compassion.
If we are to be like that, if we're to be global thinkers, won't it be a problem for us if there's other players, global players in the world who are not global thinkers, who are simply looking after their citizenry?
I feel like how other people do things is their choice. How I do things is my choice. And, compassion. I always come down on the side of compassion and equality.
Okay. About the mood of the country, okay? I noticed a lot of folks who hold progressive views were really distraught about when President Trump won. Explain to the folks who were happy about Trump winning why it seems to be so devastating to some people.
Well, I was very excited that I thought a woman was going to win, because I do really feel like this world would be a better place if there was a greater equality between men and women. So that was a great disappointment to me. And I know that many people voted for Trump, but he doesn't embody, for me, those values of compassion and equality, honesty.
Yeah.
And I find that difficult.
Okay. Since you mentioned Trump and how offensive he is to a lot of people's sensibilities, I always like bringing up the example, we both remember what Lyndon Johnson was like. I don't think any of us would like to have, him as a role model of behavior, civil behavior with anybody. But he pushed things in a direction that was tremendously beneficial to folks who have more progressive causes that they like to support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So within the bounds of law, everybody should fight for the things they believe in.
I believe that, yeah.
We hear a lot of people trying to justify, well, Trump is so bad that we just can't treat this as business as usual. Now, to me, I would like to say, hey, guys, it's our turn. You had LBJ, you had Clinton, you had Obama, we had Bush. Now we've got Trump. It's going to do the same kind of balancing idiocy that we do all the time, making our...
And I think that's true. And my brother, who's a writer, really believes that there are wonderful things coming from the Trump presidency, in part because people are standing up. For me, it's watching women stand up and say no, and say yes, and speak. To me, that's a really wonderful result of Trump's presidency.
What do you think about universal health care? Do you think health care is a human right?
I do.
Okay. With that said, the quality of health care that would be extended to people who don't have health insurance, do you think that they should have the same level of care as the people who do, whatever the preparation or earning or whatever it is that got them that kind of concierge service?
It would seem to me that there should be a very high standard that we all are capable of receiving,
okay,
as there is in, say, Denmark.
Okay, yeah. You're familiar, I'm sure, with like the debacle of urban renewal that went on in the 40s to the 70s, where every expert you talked to, from the architects to the social scientists to the social workers, said, oh yeah, the solution is let's build these giant buildings downtown where we'll put all these poor people that don't have housing, and that'll be the solution. And of course, it would, I can't imagine how much untold human misery that led to. They're all being torn down now. So you understand conservative skepticism for when people say, why don't we do a minimum wage that's a living wage? Why don't we do universal health care? The sledgehammer approach of big government tends to, it's got some fantastic successes, but it's also got some spectacular failures. So does that temper your enthusiasm for some of these big government programs at all?
I think there's a tremendous amount of brain power out there. I think there are really good solutions to most of the problems that we face. And my hope would be that even big government could come up with the best way to make life more equitable for the people in this country.
It sounds to me like you have a fair amount of idealism about...
I have a great deal of idealism and a great deal of hope.
Okay.
And my idealism and my hope really made something happen in South Africa, and I'm really hoping that it can here.
People are skeptical about folks like yourself, and I know Rennie Davis has the same opinion. I hesitate to contradict you because you made it work. Somebody like Rennie Davis, he made it work. He made change happen.
Right.
One final thing, and this is a doozy. This is the topic that nobody really likes to talk about. And if you want to pass on it, please feel free. In Arizona, immigration is a big deal. It's a big deal because the folks that have been there for 100 years, for whom the border crossed them, and, they're 100% Mexican by lineage, but they don't even speak Spanish, right? They've got very strong opinions on illegal immigration. In this part of the world, is immigration something that causes people fear? And do you think it's irrational fear, or do you think it's based on any economics that actually makes sense?
I don't think that Oregon is a place where there's a lot of immigration, and Pennsylvania wasn't either. So I don't have your experience in Arizona.
Okay.
I cry for the dreamers. I do actually think the dreamers should be allowed to stay here.
Do you think that the folks who are here already, who got here illegally, even the dreamers, so even though it wasn't them who made the decision, they did happen to land here in a status that was illegal, do you think they should have the so-called path to citizenship, or do you think they should simply be allowed to stay in the country?
I think they should have a path to citizenship. Absolutely.
Okay. So
I think we want those smart, dedicated kids who identify as American, even if they don't have a passport.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think most conservatives do agree that it's a shame. I mean, we assign the blame somewhere else. We say, you know what? I mean, a lot of people suffer from dumb things their parents did. In this case, I guess it wasn't so dumb because it's probably going to end up good for them, right? But
I hope so.
But the thing is, I hear a lot of people say, I want a path to citizenship, but I never hear them answer the question of how that affects the kind of the mood of the country, in that a bad behavior, an illegal behavior, was ultimately rewarded. Because now we have some people who've waited a long time, the Vietnamese, the Laotians. I mean, just go down the list. All the people that don't share a border with us. They waited. They did all kinds of, they won a lottery, or they got here through chain migration, or whatever reason. They had a much different experience than someone who crossed the border and stayed long enough to be declared a citizen. How do you reconcile that?
I guess I feel like we're all immigrants. I mean, my way back came over at the very beginning. But I think movement and change and new things are what give life. And so immigration is not one of my biggest worries.
Okay.
It's just not.
Okay. Oh, one last thing. And this absolutely fascinates me, and I think it is one of the core differences between conservative and liberal. Do you believe that all cultures are equally praiseworthy? Don't worry. Take as long as you...
I feel as though all cultures have the capacity to be praiseworthy. I'm not sure that all of them are, but from what I've seen in Africa, it doesn't take money to be praiseworthy. It takes something else. And I saw a lot of people with absolutely nothing who were extremely praiseworthy people.
Okay. Have you also seen in Africa things that you would never want to see come to this country?
Well, the racism and the sexism are painful. But within the black community, the women of the black community gained my respect and inspired me immensely. The way they treated people, the way they treated each other. It was quite beautiful to me, and, you know, did make me into more of a socialist. If people can be equal and caring, I think wonderful things could happen.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
That was Judy Miller, whose book Handspun Hope, Making a Difference in Rural South Africa is available on Amazon. This marks the halfway point in our Drive to Understand series. Coming up are our interviews as we drove down the West Coast from Portland to San Diego. I hope you may want to support the series by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks.